Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mildly Gothic, and if you're new here, what I like to do is a variety of artsy things. And I think this will soon be the longest running series that I have. We are again working on the Sandworm. Except today we're not actually working on too much of the Sandworm itself. There is also some we're finally going to be getting to the suit. Except as I'll talk about at the end of this video, none of what I've done may matter. But it's fine. If you have watched the last one, I did kind of hint and say that there was something missing from the Sandworm. Originally, there was only one thing I noticed, and then I realized there's actually two things. And two people got it. One person just got the one thing that I'd really mentioned, and then someone else got the second thing that I thought of as an addition. The two features that were missing were the black fin, the little black shark fin, and the black and white teeth for the outside of the head. As you'll notice, that one's not done yet because I'm trying not to do any more painting while I'm messing with the fabric, but I will get to that eventually. But people got it. It was the fin on the back. So as you can see, we'll be covering that today of how I made the fin, how I got it attached, and all of that. And otherwise, we will be getting into some pattern drafting of the suit. So I'll talk about it a little bit, but I looked at buying a pattern online or even some free patterns for suits. I don't really have easy access to a printer, and I don't feel like printing out like a 30-page thing from Staples, you know, even though it's only like 80 cents a page. I don't know. I wanted to make this even more mine, for better or worse, and so I'm going to draft it myself. It did result in a few problems, but I have something that's very frayed and looks like it's more for a cowboy outfit with all the fringe. But we are working on it. It's actually, there's still some hope in the future for the pattern. I think the fabric's the problem. If you like what you see in this video, please give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe. I haven't checked, but last I checked, I was at like 399 subscribers, so just about to pass 400, which feels crazy. So thank you so much if you are one of those new subscribers. It means the absolute world to me. I love doing these kinds of weird little artsy things and sharing them and maybe inspiring. A few people have said that this has inspired them to make sandworm puppets of their own or just sandworm related things, which I think is super cool. This project has been an incredible journey of learning like how to do so many things, as well as just discovering what I'm actually capable of, which is always really cool. So anyways, if you happen to like it, give the YouTube algorithm some love, hit a like button, maybe leave a comment to let other people know that this corner of the internet exists and that maybe they want to check it out. So with all of that said, very rambly introduction, let's get into the project. So in my infinite wisdom, I actually realized I forgot one more thing on the Sandworm. Even though I already took and posted some pictures in celebration of the movie coming out, he is not done. And that's because I forgot the fins on the top of his little body. So what I have here is shapes that I have scribbled out with Taylor's chalk. I keep dropping it, which is why my Taylor's chalk looks like it's been just, you know, abused, the poor thing. So I am going to cut one of these out, and it's about 9 inches wide at the base, and I'm pretty much going to cut on the line, so it's going to be a little bit smaller when I sew it, which isn't a problem. But I have 3 kind of mapped out. That's what I think I'm gonna do. And luckily, I still haven't fully sewn the body together, so I should be able to get my arm in there to sew these on. Now, the question I'm having is how I want to make sure these stand vertically. And so I do still have some sheets of the moldable plastic sheets, and I'm thinking to cut out a sheet shape in the shape of the inside of this and try to glue it to a little square, a rectangular flat piece, and actually cut a slit through the sandworm fabric, and then stick it up through the bottom, so the plastic, you know, bit will then be, you know, on the bottom there, and then sew the edge of this into, like, top stitch it down along the side of the actual sandworm body, and maybe put a little stuffing in it as well to kind of fluff it a little bit. That sounds very complicated. Would have been easier to plan the sandworm body to account for these. Totally. Did I do that? Unfortunately not. So this is the backup plan. The one that's definitely going to get dicey is whichever one goes on the white section, because I do think they go across all of his sections. So, you know, we're going to have to see how that goes. But anyways, I'm gonna cut some shapes out and we're gonna go from there.
I folded the fabric in half so that I would get my mirror images for each fin, and not shown, but I did just simply stitch these up with a pretty narrow seam allowance. Just really simple, not too much, and now I'll show you how I turn them inside out.
So just a quick, I have them all sewn up and I've started the prep to be able to turn them inside out, and that includes cutting the seam allowance at the top very close because this is going to be extremely narrow on the inside when I flip it inside out. So you want to make sure you cut that really close over. The other two things that I'm going to do are cut these at angles, and I'll show you. This is going to be really bunched up when I flip it inside out, and so what we're going to do is cut right up to the seam allowance, cut some little notches in it, and this should help basically when I flip it inside out, the edge not be so bunched up and wavy underneath. That's fine with some extra threads. So we're gonna do that on the inside, you know, this curve of all of them. And then for this side, it's basically gonna try to stretch out, so it could also be bunched. Instead of cutting little diamond notches, we're just gonna snip this one along the way, and it will help it to splay out when I flip it inside out, so we won't have any problems. So what I'm gonna do is make all of these cuts to all three of them, flip it inside out, iron it, and then I think I'm going to top stitch it down just so I get a really nice crisp edge and it sits flat, and then I'm going to measure the inside plastic piece for all of them. Just a quick note, I literally don't know what I was on about in the previous video because it actually, what I said is going to be swapped. This side ends up more scrunched together, so this really should have been the side that I cut little V's in, not just cut slits in. This side doesn't really matter. I cut the V's in it and it ended up more spread out, so it didn't really change anything. But actually, in all honesty, I didn't change how I cut this up and it didn't bunch up too much, so I'm just going to leave it as it is and top stitch it down. I was able to get the points mostly turned pretty okay. This is the only one I'm not super, this one, the middle one is not the only one I'm not super happy with, but I think it'll be all right. I'm going to go ahead and top stitch him.
I decided to use these moldable plastic sheets as the interior for the fin to give it a lot of stability. It's a relatively lightweight material. I totally could have used cardboard. I don't know why I didn't. I chose to use these sheets because I guess I have them. But I outlined kind of generally where they were going to go. Originally, I did think there were two fins. Don't know what I was on about. There's only one. So I did do my best to squeeze both fins onto one sheet of plastic. And so now I just have two plastic fins. One's in the sandworm, one's not. But that's okay.
This is just a really quick update. I've cut small notches into the base of the two plastic fins I'm going to use, and these are my little plastic supports, so I'm going to go ahead and glue these so those sit vertical before I stitch it onto the sandworm. So before I get way too far along and not filming, I've changed a few things. One, I swapped out the plastic bits that I'd had, which wasn't these. Oh, they're over here. These for these because I can get my needle through them, and I figured I do actually need a way to secure this to the sandworm, and these will allow for a potential like curve without ruining the structure of them. They are just attached with hot glue. There is nothing fancy there. I figured it's not going to be seen. It doesn't really matter. I have lightly stuffed the fin so that it has a little bit of dimension. You can kind of see from the top it's a little puffy. It's not perfectly stuffed, because I don't think it has to be. It doesn't need to be bone tight. And so the next step is where I'm a little anxious, I'm not gonna lie, because it's going to require me to cut a slit in the top here. I have taken all of the filling out of this section of the sandworm, as you can see. And I do, again, luckily have kind of a center reference line, but this does need to come up from the bottom. And so I'm going to have to cut a slit in that. And I don't know how I'm going to keep this head stable while I figure out how to get the fin attached, which is basically the exact length of the entire black section, if not a little bit too much. Did I measured, I swear. Yeah, it'll just fit in the bit of the black section. And I'm going to use the smallest stitches I can with, I marked out holes. Who knows if I'm going to actually be able to find them, how that's going to go. Luckily, this shouldn't be too bad because I do actually have a very easy access point in the side panel of the zipper right here to be able to sew this into the top. But this thing has slowly become more and more unwieldy with everything I add to it. So we're on this next bit. So how this is going to go, when I cut the slit in, this is going to go from the inside to the top, and it's kind of a debate of how I actually want to secure all of this in, because I don't know if I want to secure the base to the outside first or this to the outside first. I should probably secure the base, and then, so basically, because this comes out, so I'll probably secure the base in first and then secure the black fabric on top of it, because this needs to be my strong, stable foundation. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a needle and some black thread, cut that slit there, and sew the fin in place. Also, I wanted to address, the entire last video, I kept saying my phone mount was broken. That's because there's a screw on it that was loose that I didn't find until I was working on the editing stage of that video. So it works. The mount works perfectly fine. It's been working perfectly fine. It was entirely user error, but you know what? It works now, so it's fine. It's whatever. But I'm gonna go ahead and sew the fin in and show you how I do that.
By accident or divine intervention, there happened to be a fold in my black fabric that lined up basically perfectly with the center seam on the back of the head. So that's what I used as my cutting guideline to open up that space in the back of the head. Getting the actual fin inside the head was a challenge in and of itself. I ended up managing to finagle it through the slit opening because the zipper was not nearly wide enough. And once it was there, it was time to figure out how to sew it in. I started with the cardboard sections kind of just looping in and out, and I'll show you how I sewed the outside fabric down in a minute. So it's not the prettiest, but this was honestly kind of a nightmare to sew in. I have the 3 panels of the little cardboard sewn in there, and I have this kind of stitched in. And I'm going to attempt to whip stitch, I think mostly from the outside, all the way along this edge to keep this fabric nice and where it's supposed to be, I guess. Okay, so the fin is securely attached. There did end up being some bunching kind of up around the top, so it sits a little bit backwards, but that's fine. It's not too far into the white, and that's just because it was really hard to keep these sections in place when I was sewing, and I did end up using the mouth as an access point a lot more than I thought I would. So those are not small stitches. Those were the best I could do. It was really hard, and that's mostly because I was trying to use the holes I'd already established through the cardboard. It's healed a little bit now, but there is actually a pretty bad gash on my fingertip from stabbing myself with the pin more than once trying to get it through the cardboard. So would recommend thimbles for this activity. Do as I say, not as I do. But that was basically just a super simple in and out stitch to get the cardboard secured onto the black fabric. As you can see, he's deflated right now. It's not stuffed. I will probably curve these in the future just so they sit properly. But the other thing that we have here is I used, again, a ladder stitch to secure these 2 pieces of black fabric together. That is what gave me, I started with not the ladder stitch, so you can kind of see how that fabric, that join right there is a little bit more visible compared to up here. I think it ended up being a lot cleaner. So, you know, you live and you learn, but it is completely secured on, and I love it. I think the fin just adds that obviously missing detail, and it needs to be lint rolled badly, but the fin is attached. So on to the next thing. So we're finally at the suit, and I did look into some patterns online, but I actually just bought, because I wanted a new kind of suit jacket, and it also happens to be good for this purpose. I have a suit that I got from H&M. You know, it fits me a little boxy, and so obviously there's some room that I could take it in, but it is a perfectly functional suit jacket. And so, because there's this great thing you can do with basically any piece of clothing you own, and that's turn it into a pattern. Ideally, you would seam rip it apart, and I kind of explained this process for my Cowboy Bebop cosplay. I did cosplay costume that I did with my boyfriend last year for Halloween. But you basically trace out, you're gonna lay it flat, and so for some of these panels it's easy, and so I may make some modifications, like
I may just take this all the way, this seam, essentially all the way up there, and then I don't have to worry about getting this dart correct, and that panel will make a little bit more sense. But you get a little bit of ability to mess with it, and the great thing is you already know it fits you because the piece of clothing ideally fits you. So when you're mocking this out, you're going to lay it down, and essentially you're going to take parchment paper on top of it and try to mark out where all of your seams are. Also note important things like where this button sits, probably where this fold line is, any joined pieces. So when it comes time to actually putting pattern pieces together, for pieces like the shoulder seam, you'd always want to make sure you know where your darts are and, you know, where that sits on this piece. So it does take a little bit of time to analyze the construction of the actual garment before you can recreate it. However, I find it to be a pretty fascinating kind of case study and example in learning new pieces of clothing. I've done this for shorts in the past. I am going to do the same thing with the matching pants for this suit jacket. And I'm thinking of starting with the pants because I have successfully sewn several pairs of shorts before with no problem. Suits, I've technically only made one jacket, and it was the Spike Spiegel jacket. And that didn't have a legit collar. And I did do a collar for my Faye Valentine, but that one was a hot mess, I'm not going to lie. And so hopefully by analyzing the construction of this one a little bit more, maybe this jacket will be a little bit nicer. But this jacket fits me quite well. It does have shoulder pads, which I don't know if I'm going to include or not. It'll help make it look more masculine, although I'm thinking I may lean into the more feminine. This is basically a full-length suit jacket, so this sits long. So I am thinking of cropping just a few inches off the waist to make it a little bit more feminine. But for the look that this jacket is, I love it, but for the costume, I do think I'm going to cut just probably about whatever may or may not be in frame of a few inches off the end there. But yeah, this is if you want to get into sewing and you have clothes that fit you and you want more of them and you want to learn to sew, look at the clothes you already have. They are going to be your best guide to learning how to make new things. Again, if you are willing, pick clothes you are willing to completely seam rip apart. That is going to be the only way you'll truly understand, you know, some of the intricacies of how, you know, some of this was sewn together. But you can pay attention to the way these seams are done, how that's pressed in, and just kind of all of that jazz. So this is a lot of rambling, but the entire point is to say, I'm going to be making my own pattern for this off of this suit jacket. Is it going to add time and complexity to it instead of just buying a pattern? Yes. However, I think this is more fun, and that means whatever I end up with, however accurate or inaccurate, is completely my own fault, my own creation, and my own design. For better or worse, it will be entirely on me. So that is what I am going to attempt to do, is draft up some pattern pieces.
So, unlike my previous advice from working with parchment paper, you'll notice I'm not crinkling it here. I'm not entirely sure how much that would have helped or not. I was keeping the parchment paper pretty as flat as possible. I have the pants laid out very flat on the table, and I'm using my fingers to help me trace where that seam is and trying to draw that line exactly on the seam. I'm not doing the seam allowance here. I'm trying to mark exactly where that stitch line should be. Sometimes flipping up the parchment paper to see underneath and where that seam line actually sits. But for the most part, you can kind of use your fingers and feel where the bulk of the fabric is and what that means for the placement of the seam. The hardest part is keeping the pattern aligned as you move from the top to the bottom. But once you feel like you have it kind of figured out, I always recommend cutting larger than your actual drawn lines, because the next step, after you have all of your pencil lines and your super basic structure cut out, you want to then kind of true it up. And it's easier to see when it's not a massive rectangle of fabric and it's more accurate to the garment that you are going to create. So you cut it pretty close to the seam line and then line it up with the pants to figure out how true your measurements were and if you need to actually adjust anything.
Something to note if you're ever making your own patterns based on your own clothing, always keep in mind the details from the clothing that you want to keep track of. So like for this one, I've marked where the bottom of the fly is going to be. I've also marked where the pocket opening sits so that I can make sure that I have that. This line here is going to represent my grain line, so I remember what direction my grain line should be when I go to cut this pattern out. And I've labeled it so that when I cut out 3 more panels, I don't forget what this one was. And I say 3 because I think, so the front can't be duplicated because there is the whole zipper fly situation, and so that's going to require some extra, that's going to require the other front panel to be different. But I do believe the back panels are going to be symmetrical. So I'm thinking I'll just need 3 pattern pieces for the legs. And then it looks like the waistband is in, I think, only 3 pieces. There's 2 front pieces that meet at the side seam. And then there's the back piece as well. The back ones are going to be interesting with the darts, but I'll show you how I sort of plan to tackle them. And also, can we stop doing fake non-pockets, please? And thank you. This is stupid. If you're going to give me, part of why I like these pants is they actually have pretty decent front pockets, especially for women's dress pants. And that comes with the sacrifice of no back pockets, which is really funny because my other pairs of women's dress pants have very nice back pockets and no front pockets. So, you know, I guess I just can't win. But I think I'm going to keep these side pockets, to be determined if I actually want to implement like full back pockets or not. But regardless, I'm going to go ahead and make the rest of the pattern pieces and then show you what I've got. Mid-pattern drafting update. I think I can actually get away with making the front panels duplicates because looking at how the fly situation work, my pattern lines it perfectly for this. There we go, if we can get a decent camera angle. For this here and up against this zipper line. Now that's okay because obviously the pattern is going to have seam allowance. So when I cut out the left front leg, I may just do a little bit extra seam allowance in the crotch. And so the other pieces that are going to be necessary is because this seam, this outside fabric actually gets folded under when the zipper gets sewn in, and this is an entirely separate little stack of fabric. So I think I can get away with making the front panels duplicates of each other. So I'm gonna go ahead and probably draft the back panels. That makes my life a little bit easier. I am not looking forward to figuring out the whole fly closure and everything. I'm sure I'll find some tutorial on YouTube to help, but I have never done that before. That is something completely new for me for this project. I have done shorts with an elastic waistband, so actually putting in a zipper fly is going to be something entirely foreign, and we're going to hope that these fit me well and don't have weird, funny business going on with the fit. But anyways, on to drafting the back. So one of the biggest challenges you'll come across if you try to do this, method with existing clothes that you don't want to take apart is when you have something like the back part of pants where the fabric is not going to lay completely flat as far as the space on the table. It's designed to curve, and so this is why it is typically easier to take it apart. And you'll notice this back leg panel, I will never be able to get this flat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to map out the one seam to the best of my ability and then probably swap what's on top, and I'll put the parchment paper on the bottom and the pants on top to line that seam up and then roll the fabric. So I can basically just take it and, once I have that seam set up, and you just try to essentially roll so you can get your other seam and lay it out flat. I'll see if I can get it on film as far as how that goes. But that is the one thing is that can be really hard, is lining up these seams when you have all of this extra fabric, because I can line it up to this edge, and even so when I get this to lay flat, there's where that edge is, but my seam is actually another whole inch away. And so just things to keep in mind, have in consideration when you are drafting patterns from clothing is there is a lot of weird manipulation, which is why it's always a good idea to do a mock-up. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do a mock-up for these pants. I might just go straight to my real fabric, but I'm going to allow plenty of seam allowance so that way I can kind of have the room to make adjustments if necessary. It is always easier to make something smaller than it is to make something bigger. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the crotch section and the inner leg and go from there. So I got the back panel cut out. Unfortunately, this side, which is the outside seam, I didn't quite have enough parchment paper and it got a little wonky. So my plan is to basically do a standard seam allowance everywhere else and do a very generous one on this side so that I can kind of give myself a little bit of extra wiggle room and grace, because I think it's maybe 0.5 centimeter of space that's missing consistently all the way up and down this line. That is, of course, the risk with making these patterns myself, but you know what? It is for a masculine character, so it doesn't need to be super feminine fit, especially for the pants. I just need them to not look terrible, which arguably ill-fitting means they will, but we're gonna work it out. I will eventually draft the waistband. Again, the waistband is in 3 parts. I'm not too concerned. I do have to decide, that is not elastic, that's basically extra support. So I do have to decide how I want to do the waistband instead, because I don't have whatever, or I guess that is elastic, but it's elastic attached to very non-stretchy fabric. So I don't have this, so I don't know how I want to do the waistband. We will figure it out. But I might just do it as double-sided, you know, panels. And I think they do it in the 3 because these pants do have a taper up to the waist. So, but I'm going to leave the waistband kind of till later because I do need to get the pants panels sewn together. And if these are super off, then the waistband's going to be super off. So, and luckily the waistband is basically the different lengths of the pants. So if I get the pants all sewn together, it will be fine. I've also decided to ignore this, and I'm just hoping with how I drafted the base, it'll account for this whatever at the top, because I can't tell if it's just detailing or if it was actually designed to taper, because it is a slight trapezoid, but it's mostly a rectangle. So we're going to see how that works, but I do think I'm going to go ahead and cut out my pattern pieces. Scary. Like a professional, I use the floor, but as you can see, so I'm making pants, so I'm going to have my grain line vertical. My selvage edge, it's kind of hard to see, but it is on this edge there, so my grain line is running in this direction. I have my full fabric folded in half because these panels should be identical, so I am going to cut out 2 at the same time. And it doesn't matter right now which way is right side up or down, because since it's folded in half, I will get mirror images and I will get the right side on one of both sets. So I'm going to go ahead and cut them out. I'm probably going to scooch that one maybe a little bit more towards the selvage edge because, again, I need to make sure I have enough room to give myself some good grace and flexibility on this side. But otherwise, I'm going to probably pin these in place, maybe use some pattern weights and cut them out. So we've got all the pattern pieces cut out. These are the back panel on top, and then the front one is underneath. They're not pinned together anymore, but I'm going to fold up and gently put away my patterns. And so this is where the insides, the right sides and wrong sides matter. This fabric does have, I thought it did, a relatively distinct right and wrong side. Whatever it is, I'm just going to try to keep it consistent across the pants and then hopefully the jacket. I am going to sew the U together for the crotch for the front and the back of the pants, and then I will sew the front and back together. Sorry, I lied. It's not the front and the back that get sewn together, it is the words. It is not the 2 back panels that get sewn together. I think I said it correctly. One back panel gets sewn to one front panel, and then so you have 2 basically halves of the pants, and then you sew that crotch together, if I'm not mistaken. I will map out what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing because I've made shorts before, but verbally saying it is not translating, so I'm gonna pin my pieces together and then tell you what I'm actually doing. So I have the inner inseam of both sides sewn together, and I have marked out the U for the crotch. And if you'll notice, this pin is facing the other direction, and that's because that's where the fly happens. And I actually think I'm going to pause and create the little structure needed for that,
because it does kind of look like this just gets sewn in with, at least this side, gets sewn up with it. Now that is only on one side and not the other. I don't know. But basically, my plan was stop sewing before that pin, so I'm not going to sew anything up there, and I'm just going to sew down here to try to sew it together to get an idea of how this whole closure situation is going to work, and I think that should be okay. I could always seam rip it if necessary. Once I sew that, though, I am maybe going to take those pins out and do the securing stitch for the inner seam line, just because I think that'll be easier if I do that now. So I think that's actually what I'm going to do. I at least know, and I can leave that pin in or just remeasure it. I'll probably just measure it. But yeah, I'm going to do the top stitch on the outside of this to get that down, because that's going to be a lot easier to do now instead of later. And then I'm going to sew the U together, and I will be doing something relatively similar for the pockets, because if I want to put the pockets in, I kind of need to do that now, or at least figure it out. So in this mess of red fabric, we do have some progress. So to decipher how things are connected right now, I have the both inseams fully done, and as you can see, the crotch is connected with a large gap left in the middle to figure out the fly situation. And this piece of fabric over here is going to be one of the pockets. And so I have both of them sewn to the respective outsides. And the way these get sewn is you basically sew them on the right sides of the fabric, so that way when I flip them in, we'll get the nice pretty edges there, and I'll sew this up. So the next step that happens with the pocket, and I'm only working on one leg right now, is we're going to flip these back inside out and coordinate everything, because everything is all over the place. All right, so we've got this puppy inside out. As you can see, we have our seam right there, and what we're going to do is I'm going to iron this seam flat and then line up where my pockets sit, and I'm going to sew around the entire thing that's not in frame. So I'm going to sew up this line here and then come out and sew up my pocket, and then that will completely stitch up the side of my pant. Is doing a lot of this and not having tried it on and just kind of eyeballing a pattern probably a bad idea? Yeah. Am I also kind of starting to hate this fabric a little bit? Yes. This fabric is fraying a whole heck of a lot, meaning I'm going to try to do my best to, that's why I wanted to make sure I got this extra line down there. That should help it stop fraying a little bit. These are costume pants. These are not intended as real wear pants, which is what I'm telling myself as a saving grace. Worst comes to worst, this suit only lasts for Halloween. And I will learn a lot of lessons and maybe make another one in the future. But I am going to start by replicating this pocket on the other side, and then ironing this flat and then stitching up my side seam, at which point I will be able to try them on. Could I pin this up and try them on at that point? Yes, I could. Do I feel like stabbing myself with a lot of pins? No, I don't. So basically in an hour, I'm either going to have pants or a meltdown. That's where we're going with this. Again, these are project vlogs. I am learning as I go with a lot of these things. So I'm really excited to see how this turns out, and hopefully these don't look terrible. So that's what we're doing. Well, I did a test fit and there's an unfortunate verdict. They don't exactly fit, but they don't fit in a very specific place that I may actually be able to do something about. It is specifically this seam here where the pocket attaches, this kind of base, which makes sense because I was very aggressive in the amount of seam allowance that was there. And so what I think I'm going to do is mimic something how these were done, and how there's kind of a little bit of visible fabric underneath where the pocket's actually attached. And what I kind of am hoping that will let me do is basically just open this up to a V, and probably I will unstitch this from, because you can see I took a lot of fabric here, so I'll unstitch this, and I don't think I'll sew. Basically, I'm going to take out the pockets and I'm going to be redoing the top part of this. The crotch looks like it fits honestly perfectly fine. I just need to fix the width in this
basically right here, the widest part of my hips, it's not quite wide enough. And you can kind of see there probably should be more of a curve to it, and there isn't. So essentially, I'm gonna put in some triangle panels, but do it in such a way that it hopefully blends in with the pocket. And in such a way that I don't have to redo the entire pants. I honestly, if I can make it look stylistic, I think we'll be fine. But I think I basically just have to change how the pockets are sewn in, and hopefully that's it. But yeah, work in progress. So as I've seam ripped these pockets apart, I think I've also realized I want to scrap the fabric I have here if I'm going to do the kind of opening of the pocket seam like I talked about. And that's honestly okay with me because these were scrap pieces left over from cutting out these two pieces, the pant fabric initially. So I haven't actually wasted any additional yardage from what is left. Those are just pieces of scrap. So I might cut out actual real pockets to kind of better fit the situation and also help me tie it in with the waistband because I think they're going to need to reach up to the waistband. So I think I'm going to have to actually draft a pair of pockets that is not just random scrap rectangles. Okay, so for a little outro for this video, I just kind of wanted to talk about what I think is coming next with this. And that is, I may actually be about to go find new fabric. I do want to try to fix the pocket situation that I talked about. I've already kind of worked towards it. There's a variety of things that are seam ripped apart so that I can kind of get in and figure out what to do. But the pocket situation kind of exposed, this fabric has a really bad fraying problem. I don't have a serger. I don't know that I have the best ways to deal with this. And the other way to probably deal with it is to use French seams. But I don't know if I have enough fabric here. I've not done French seams before, so I don't know if the seam allowance requirements are a little bit different. So I don't know if I'd need to cut out new pattern pieces for the pants in order to do that. And if I do that, I don't know how much fabric I have left for the jacket, and I want them to be out of the same fabric. So I am considering going to Joann's and seeing if I can find a different fabric. I did purchase this online from Fabric Wholesale Direct. It was a relatively cheap fabric, so I am not the most surprised. The pieces that are fraying the worst are obviously the pieces I've messed with the most. The inseam is actually, you know, not fraying too bad, but the outseam, where I'm still manipulating and messing with it a lot, is fraying very badly. So I may start this all over. However, if I do, I have some good lessons learned because I now know where the fit issues on this are, and I can actually go and redraft the back portion of the pants and make sure that I get that extra spacing that these didn't have. So these may end up being my mock-up and not my final product, but you'll just have to stick around and find out. That's all I've got for you in this one. Thank you so much for sticking around. I look forward to the updates. The next update is the chaos continues, because it's really becoming something. I mean, this thing is wearable. I'm just basically trying to add the finishing touches, which making a whole suit sounds like not a finishing touch, but it kind of is, because this is the really impressive part. The suit just goes along with it. Am I still stubbornly not going to buy a suit for right now? If it comes down to Halloween and I don't have one and Spirit Halloween still has them in stock, maybe, but we're a long ways away from that. So I'm very excited to see where this continues, and I really thank you for sticking along with this journey, and hope you enjoy. If you want to see, I have a whole playlist of all the other pieces of this costume cosplay. I'm not entirely sure what to call it. So if you want to check those out, go ahead. If you want to see other cosplays I've done, I have playlists of all of them, along with some various playlists of different kind of crafty things. Again, a rambly outro, because I don't script things. Surprise. But if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. If you are a new subscriber, thank you for joining my little corner of the internet. It is so lovely to have you. I hope you stick around. And with all of that, I will see you in the next one.